Welcome to the 60-Day Novel Challenge. It is week one. I am so excited to be here with you. And before we dive into anything, I want to give you a big congratulations because taking on a challenge like this and just showing up to the first of our 8 lessons that we're going to be doing once a week for the entire challenge is such a big step. You are taking the first step to make this commitment to write a novel in 60 days. That's crazy. And you should be congratulated for it. You should give yourself a round of applause, a pat on the back, a big old smile, because I'm so happy you are here and we are in for some exciting stuff over the next 2 months. We have a handful of things to get into for week one, and we are not starting slow. All right, we are diving right into this because we have work to do. But before we get to that, I do want to make sure you are aware of everything that you have access to. If you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't yet, go ahead and join us over at dabbleu.com in the 60-Day Novel Challenge space. There's a link down below in the description that will help you get there. Doing that will put you in a community of other people taking on this challenge and will give you access to the 60-Day Novel Challenge template in Dabble. Not only that, but people who haven't used Dabble before, we are extending this 2-month-long invitation for you to take a trial during this entire 60-day challenge. That means you can get complete access to everything that Dabble Writer has to offer for the entire 60 days without even putting in a credit card. And you'd be joining the thousands of authors who are already using the world's best novel writing platform to write their story. And I'm not just saying that because I'm paid to. I used Dabble before I joined the Dabble team. I'll be sure to remind you of that at the end of the video, but let's dive into the week one lessons. Week one is all about laying the big picture foundation for your story. To that end, we have 3 steps this week, one of them being optional depending on the kind of story you're writing. First, we're going to understand your genre, and that includes understanding your audience as well. Then we're going to do some high-level brainstorming of your plot to figure out what ideas you have brewing in there, pull some more out if you can't quite figure them out, talk about the conflict, and lay out the major beats. And then finally, if it's up your alley, we're going to do a little bit of world building this week as well. So if that sounds good, stick around for this video because we are going to talk about all 3 of those things, and everything that we do discuss has exercises to go along with it in the Dabble template and over in our community. Okay, step 1, understand your genre. This is something that new writers probably don't even think about until their story is done, but it is a critical first step for writing a story, especially if you're trying to write a story in such a small amount of time. 60 days, especially when we split it up 30 days in planning, 30 days in writing, is not a lot of time. We need to be efficient about this, and that means understanding all the tools available to you. Before we get into the weeds about your characters or theme or magic system or the specifics of your plot, let's understand the sandbox that we're going to be playing in. Let's start by figuring out why we even care about this in the first place. Why does it matter if we know what genre we are writing in? Well, genre is important for both you and your reader. For the author, it gives us a sense of what tools are available to us, what things we can leverage when we're writing. So, for example, I write both dark fantasy and urban fantasy. And I know that when I write urban fantasy, I have access to archetypes and themes and dialogue and voice that I would not include in dark fantasy, and vice versa. At the same time, readers have their favorite genre and subgenre, and so they look for those stories in particular and go in with a certain set of expectations. If you're writing a romance story and you suddenly pull in unexpected elements of horror, your readers are not going to like them. So before we dive too deep into your plot, which is coming up in step 2 this week, I want you to think about what genre you're writing and start with the high level. Fantasy, sci-fi, romance, mystery, thriller, historical fiction, magical realism, what have you. What genre are you writing in? Then we're going to drill down a little bit further and understand your subgenre, because like I mentioned before, there are differences even within the same genre. Dark fantasy and urban fantasy are very different genres, even if there's some overlap. This is where you pick out if you are doing some kind of fun combination, like despite what I said before, a horror romance could work if you're intentional, you find the right audience. Maybe a cozy mystery that's in a sci-fi atmosphere, that would be a fun combo too. Realistically though, I want you to drill down as deep as you can into subgenre and maybe even tropes if you know them. That's more for my romance authors out there, but instead of just saying you're doing a romance novel, you're doing a hockey rom-com. And within that hockey rom-com, you're going to have enemies to lovers with forced proximity. You might not be able to get that specific with every genre. Okay, romance can get very specific with subgenres and tropes. But no matter what you're writing, I want you to figure out the subgenre that you're writing into. Okay, not just fantasy, dark fantasy, not just sci-fi, space opera. And then this is going to involve a little bit of research when we get to the homework for this week. The assignments, the exercises, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it homework because that makes me feel cool. So you'll find this homework in the Dabble template that we provide you, but also over in the community over at dabbleu.com. But I'm going to run through the questions real quick so you can get thinking about them. First, what genre are you writing in? This is the high level one. And then I want you to do some research and figure out what are some expectations or tools within that genre that you want to incorporate in your story. Then we're going to drill a little bit deeper. Think about the subgenre that you want to write in and do the same thing. A little bit of research to figure out what tools, characteristics, or expectations you're going to include because you've chosen this subgenre. Then I want you to think about other stories like yours and come up with at least 3 characteristics of your ideal audience. And this could be demographics, interests, hobbies, professions, comparative authors, anything that gives you a better understanding of who is going to read your book. Don't stress too much about this, okay? I don't want you doing like a 5-hour deep dive research expedition to figure out your ideal audience. As we go through this process over the next 60 days, you're going to understand your book even more. And so you'll understand your genre, your subgenre, and your audience even more. But setting these initial expectations, understanding what you have to play with and who's going to be reading your book will help you in the steps this week and in the weeks to come. All right, step 2 this week, we are going to do some plot brainstorming. The hardest thing for me when it came to creating the 60-day novel challenge and the curriculum that goes along with it is that there's no real one way to start writing a novel. So we went with a way that builds layers upon one another and makes the most sense logically in its flow. For that, we're going to start with this high-level brainstorming. I don't need you to think about subplots right now. I don't need you to think about specific scenes. We're just going to go for that high-level stuff. Because we're focusing on high level, there's no wrong way to start this either. So I want you to think about one idea that you have for your story right now, for your plot. That could be a character, conflict, a setting, a specific scenario, answering a what if question. And you're just going to jot down anything that comes to mind based off of that. Feel free to repeat this process over and over again, but we're just trying to extract all of the information, all of those cool ideas that your imagination has already come up with and put them on paper so we can build on them. If that's really difficult for you, and I don't blame you if it is, there's a couple things you can do to help facilitate this brainstorming process. One of my favorite things is just the classic word vomit. You set a timer. If you're using Dabble, we have a built-in timer for you, and you just let it go and you type. You type and you type and you type and you don't stop, just vomiting all of those ideas out, and we can parse through them after to figure out which ones you want to include. You can also do a mind mapping exercise. And this is where you start with one topic and then you branch out to something related to it. And then that branches out to something related to that. And then you can revisit the initial one, branch out somewhere else, and then branch again and again and again. Keep repeating this process until you have this web, this map of ideas that all link to this initial idea you had. Again, there's no one thing that we're looking for here, but there are very important elements to a plot that we can start focusing on if these trends start to emerge. And these are included in your homework, both in the template and over at Dabble. But let's go through them real quick. The first, we're talking about conflict. There are 2 very important kinds of conflict in a story, external and internal. External conflict is what we always call the sexy one. It's the one that sells books. It's what the story is about. So like a necromancer and their invading army of zombies, or 2 people competing for promotion at work. It could be an alien on a spaceship when the crew is out in the middle of nowhere and they've run out of fuel. Or like an Indiana Jones style archaeology adventure. This is what the book's about, and eventually this will be the thing that gets in the way most of the time of your protagonist reaching their goal. If you need more help understanding external conflict, in the Dabble template, you're going to find a ton of resources for you to further expand your understanding of the craft. And that goes for anything that we talk about for all of the lessons that we're going to be doing throughout this entire challenge. Now, the other type of conflict is internal conflict, and this one is less flashy. It's less exciting, but arguably it is much more important. Internal conflict is the conflict going on inside of a character, but it's more than that. It's also the thing that's getting in their way of accomplishing their goal. Now, you might be thinking, Doug, you said that's what the external conflict does, and you're right. Both of them do it. The internal conflict is personal, though. It's the thing that will drive the transformation of the character. And it's only through that transformation, through that conquering of their internal conflict, that they can overcome the external conflict. Don't try and wrap your head around that too much if you don't understand it yet, because we're going to be talking a lot more about it as the challenge progresses. Just know that when you're brainstorming, we're looking for 2 primary conflicts when it comes to your protagonist, your main character. The external one that they're facing on their journey, and the internal one that is slowing them down and making things more difficult. But those aren't the only things going on in a story. And we're going to talk about subplots in a later week, but I also want to draw your attention to the 5 major plot beats that we at least want to think about this week and start jotting down some ideas for. Now, I know there's some pantsers out there who hate the idea of planning, and we have a whole month dedicated to it. But don't worry, we've also thought about you while we're doing this, and you can do as much planning as you want this month or as little of it. But for this first week, I want everybody, plotters and pantsers and everybody in between, to be thinking about these 5 major beats. First, the inciting incident. And the inciting incident is the event that pushes the protagonist out of their ordinary world and towards the story that they're going to be embarking on. It is a big, unexpected event that forces them to make a choice, and that choice drives them away from normal and towards a new goal. Then there's the rising action. And some people call this the fun and games, even though it tends to be a lot worse than that sounds. But this is all the stuff that happens after your character leaves their ordinary world and starts making their way to that goal. It's the enemies they make, the friends that they make, the trials and tribulations that they endure. It's the stuff that makes a story really exciting and drives growth in a character. Next up, we have the midpoint. And the midpoint, as it kind of sounds, falls somewhere in the middle of your novel. This is the most devastating moment yet for your character, and it forces this internal change. This is the moment where they go from reactive to proactive. This is when things stop happening to them and they start going towards their goal with renewed vigor and purpose. Then there's the climax, which comes towards the end of the novel, and this is what everything has been building up towards. This is the climactic moment of the novel. Again, we'll touch more on this as we progress through the challenge, but in this moment, your main character has to overcome their internal conflict to overcome the external conflict. And it's just really exciting. I mean, this is what everything's been building up to. This is what you and the readers have been looking forward to this whole time. And then finally, there's the resolution. And this comes after the climax when everything starts to get wrapped up. You want to focus on what the world looks like now, what's happened to the characters now that the story is coming to an end. Like I said before, there's going to be links to resources to help you understand these beats in the project template. But just for now, start thinking about what might fall into each of these categories. What does the climax look like? What friends and enemies do I want my character to make? What's a particularly devastating moment that I can throw at them that's going to shift the way they approach things or what their goal might be? If you find that you can't fill out these 5 beats to the extent that you want or at all, that's okay. Don't stress about it. This whole month is dedicated to better understanding your story and setting you up for success when we go to write 50,000 words in the span of 30 days. So next week, when we talk about characters, you're probably going to get inspired for specific moments in the rising action or what your midpoint might be or what you want the climax to look like. And you'll revisit your brainstorming and fill in more details there. Same thing with week 3 and week 4. We're also just getting started. Capture the essentials, capture the things that are inspiring, do a little bit of exploring and brainstorming, see what you can come up with, and then we move on. For your homework for this step, you're going to find exactly what we just talked about. You're going to find space to jot down the high-level ideas you already have and the things you come up with for brainstorming. You're going to find notes taking space for both the external and internal conflict your protagonist is going to face, and then some space to brainstorm the 5 key plot beats we talked about. And then we come to the third step, which is optional this week and is all about world building. Now, if you're writing in a speculative fiction genre like fantasy or romantasy or sci-fi, this is more important because your world is going to play a crucial role in your story. If you're doing a hockey romance or a mystery thriller set in New York City, this is less important, but you still need to do some world building and often some research. Now, we have a great article linked in the template for this week to get you to understand what world building means and how you can translate it into your novel. I strongly suggest that you read that and then you jot down those high-level ideas about your world that you're already thinking of, that are already dug into your mind somewhere, so we can extrapolate on them later. Because that's really what this optional third step is this week. It's pulling out all the ideas you already have, choosing one, and then expanding on. There is no wrong way to go about this. Remember, this week is all about high level. It's all about brainstorming. So follow what you're most excited about. Follow what you think will be most important for your story and just have fun with it. Come up with the really cool details that we can incorporate later. While you're doing that, there are some essentials to your genre that you might want to focus in on based on the research you did for step 1. So if you're writing fantasy, you might want to think about the magic system and the political landscape and the landscape itself. If you're writing sci-fi, then how the universe looks, what space travel looks like, what the military factions are. If you're writing historical fiction, then you're going to want to research what daily life looked like, what culture looked like, what language sounded like in this time and place. And if you're writing something a little more contemporary, then a quick fact check into specific elements will go a long way for this initial drafting process. Don't get lost here. There is a thing called world builder's disease where you get so consumed by world building that you forget to do all the other stuff, which is why this is the third step this week and an optional one. I want you to make sure you do the other two steps before you tackle world building. And once you've done all that brainstorming, the Dabble template includes our great world building Bible to help you organize all of those crazy ideas that you have. And pro tip, it is just one of the many resources included in that template. And that's it. That's our lesson for week one. And I am so excited that you are joining us for this challenge. We're going to make some awesome books throughout the next 60 days. By the end of this week, I want to make sure that you have your genre and subgenre nailed down. You know a bit about the audience you're writing for. I want to make sure you brainstorm some plot ideas, including the internal and external conflict and the 5 key plot beats we talked about. And if you're up for it, do some world building too. I mentioned it before, but if you are joining us and you are brand new to Dabble, then you can get access to a trial for the entire challenge to work through the template that we've built and experience the world's best novel writing software. No strings attached, no credit card needed. You won't get charged unless you want to become a dabbler once we're done the 60-day challenge. And in that, you'll find the exercises we'll be doing over the next few weeks so you can glance ahead and start thinking about things you want to include. And listen, finishing week one is very exciting and you should be proud of yourself, right? This is a big first step to writing a novel. And especially if this is your first time writing a book, that's huge. You've committed to understanding your story's foundation and you've taken steps to bring it to life. It's okay if your ideas feel rough or underdeveloped or unfinished at this time. We're going to develop and polish them as we progress through the challenge. The thing is, you showed up, stick with me. We're going to have a great 2 months with this. And I'll see you next week where we're talking about characters and you get to meet your cast.